And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at Sonic the Hedgehog Battle Racers. Sonic is pretty hot right now, just coming off a movie in the movie theaters that a lot of people liked, some people didn't, but either way, Sonic the Hedgehog is who he is. One of the most recognizable faces in video gaming because he brings something different to the table. When he first showed up, it was a video game in which you played and it didn't slow down. The first time I played Sonic blew my mind. It felt like I was playing a pinball game almost as he just zoomed through, and I'm still not very good at Sonic games where he runs so fast I'm just not sure of what's going on half the time. But it is fun to watch and neat to play, and nowadays very divergent into, you know, the app where you're running around collecting rings and things like that. This is, I think, the second time I reviewed a Sonic the Hedgehog racing game. The first one I was not a fan of at all. So hopefully this one I like better. In this one, you are one of the four main characters, Sonic, Amy, Tails, and Knuckles. You're going to be running and racing through a track, trying to get the most rings. Here's how it plays. So this is a race game in which you're going to be picking your character, and the starter set, and there's 17 expansions, but the starter set comes with Sonic, Knuckles, Tails, and Amy, which are probably the four main characters of Sonic. They're the ones that I see in all the video games anyway. And you're going to be racing down these two randomly placed straightaways into a curve, and then once someone hits the curve, you'll draw two more straightaways and add another curve going the other way, and then draw two more straightaways and then put the finish line there. Now, it's not the first person to finish. As the game goes by, players are going to be collecting rings and putting them here. You'll put them down and then just stack them on top of each other, and whoever has the most rings wins. Just that by getting done first, you won't lose more of your rings. Players are going to be playing the game over a series of turns, and in those turns, they're going to be playing movement cards. You're going to have a hand of movement cards that are drawn from a deck here. Each turn, players are going to play one of these cards, reveal them, and the highest number card is going to go first. Every card has a different number. And then players are going to essentially do what it says on the card. So here's examples of the cards. Boost will let you jump a space, or you can increase your speed by 1. You'll notice players have speed, and they can increase it up to 6. Speed can go to 9, but only by things on the board. Like every time you land on one of those, you'll go forward, go a little bit faster. Spin Dash lets you spin, which is one of the ways you can attack some of the ground enemies and take them out so that they don't bust you, because if you don't spin and you hit them, you will lose your rings, which will all be piled around you. And if you don't lose your ring, if you have no rings, then you're sent back to the beginning of the track. And so here you would spin, and then you would increase your speed by 3. Brake slows you down. Power lets you activate your racer power. Each of the racers has their own specific power. So when she uses power, she damages all adjacent racers. When using this, Sonic cannot be damaged, ignores elevation, and can destroy rocks. Here, when using his power, increase Tails' speed by 3. So they all have a specific power. I should mention they all have a special ability too, but this is always in play. Like this says, when jumping, Tails can jump diagonally. Once per turn, when she's running behind someone else, she can increase her speed by 1, and so on. And Knuckles has that stuff too. And Shift lets you run one space, or you can increase your speed by 1. Now, after you do these, at the bottom then, you will move. You're going to move in a straight line or jump. Jumping lets you avoid all the obstacles. Movement is going to move you until you hit an obstacle and stop. Like there are rocks that are placed on the board. When you run through rings, you're going to collect them. If you run into enemies, that could be problematic depending on what kind of enemy it is. Each of the badniks has a different special abilities. And then, of course, there's rings and rocks. There's also elevation. So you'll stop if you try to get onto an elevation. And the elevations have different levels. When you hit a corner, your speed will slow to that speed. You can't go through the corners at super high speed. And that's pretty much it. You're just going to go around trying not to hit stuff. That will cause you to lose all your rings. You'll want to jump over those probably, although there are rings in some of the spaces. You want to fight the enemies and spin into them. And eventually, once you finish, have the most rings. The player with the most rings is the winner. Now this definitely looks pretty cool when you place it out on a board like this. These boards are pretty thin, and I don't know why they're not double-sided. You could have mixed them up and had double the amounts of stuff on them. I'm pretty sure more boards are added in expansions, I would assume, because these are going to be the same 6 boards used in every game. On the boards themselves are different spots where you will randomly place bad guys, and depending on how many players, you'll add bad guys on these spots, and then rings, and then there's little numbers that show you the elevation of different spots. And I do appreciate that they have a track reference card that shows you what all the different terrains do to you, and then they show you what's on the expansion tracks, which you don't have in this game. The cards themselves are pretty clear. These are very basic on how all the things work, and I didn't run into too many problems with that. I should mention the number one component of this game are the miniatures themselves, which are pre-painted. They look great. Although, because they all have arms out, it's hard to put them next to each other on the board sometimes. That's not a huge thing, but And then the box itself, which holds everything, and you'll notice barely uses the space in the box, but I'm assuming that's because you're going to want to stick in one of the many expansions. You can see here's 5 people, there's 4 more, there's their other games that Shinobi makes, and there's 4 more. A lot of different characters that you could race with and include all of them. I've only played with the base stuff. Now, on a negative basis here is the rule book. This is not a bad looking rule book. It seems very straightforward. And it also explains how to do a boss run there, where you run against a special boss. It explains those rules in the boss track expansions, even though they're not in this game at all. But for as short as these rules were, I had to look up stuff multiple times. It was not that easy to figure out, and in fact, there was a very difficult thing when you run. Do you run in a straight line? Because one page said one thing, another page seemed to say something differently, and I had to look it up online to see. And that's a pretty basic part of the game. I'd say the rule book, for how simple the game is, and it's not that complex, the rule book wasn't written very well. There's a lot of good ideas in this game. The simultaneous card play with one number going first and then the different actions works really well. At the end of your turn, then you'll pick one of 4 face-up cards, add it to your hand, and you'll play these in the future. And trying to figure out the right cards to play at the right time is a good idea. Moving around, collecting rings, fighting bad guys, good ideas. Random track, which you can't see too far ahead, but you can see pretty far ahead, good idea. You can see where this is going, though. I really felt like even though it's a bunch of good ideas, the gameplay itself just didn't do anything for me. Now, part of that is that it felt weird that I had to look up rules for a game that was this simple. But the biggest problem I have is Sonic the Hedgehog is all about speed, and this game isn't. And I realized that taking a fast video game and putting it onto a board game, or taking any racing game and putting it into a board game, is a very difficult thing. Racing board games, by their very nature, aren't usually very fast. They kind of move at a slow glacier pace. This one's really problematic because you need to avoid the badniks. You need to avoid the obstacles there. You cannot afford to play the wrong card at the wrong time. You'll lose all your rings, which isn't very fun. And my kids very much clearly said this to me when we played it. They said, "This isn't fun," every time they lost all their rings because they played the wrong card or miscalculated. And to not play the wrong card and to not miscalculate means you need to sit there for a long time thinking about the card you're going to play and how it's going to affect you. And even then it could get messed up because someone else could run in front of you or do something that just throws you off. In fact, the game doesn't even mention what happens when you run into somebody else, and it should. One of the problems that wasn't in the rule book. So a bad rule book isn't helping this out. A somewhat glacier play, in my opinion, of how it plays. You can play really fast, but then you're just going to be constantly going back. The rule book even did weird things like, I guess, it just kept saying go back to the first column. So is this a column, or it depends on how you're looking at it. And it was, I assume it's the first. Who calls these columns? But that was just an odd thing for me. It looks great on the table. It has all the things from Sonic the Hedgehog, but it kind of proves the point that a video game should not necessarily be a board game. They're 2 different mediums, oftentimes for a reason. And Sonic thrived on its speed, and I'm just not getting that from here. Not to mention, sometimes you need to slow down, and you simply didn't get a break card, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just can't catch a break. Ha ha. The expansions don't look like they add much else. They add more characters and stuff, and this must have been a Kickstarter since there's 17 expansions or what have you. I'm sure some people are going to like it. And listen, folks, I'm not an anti-Sonic the Hedgehog fan. He's one of my favorite characters to use in games. It's just that this doesn't feel like a Sonic game to me. It might to you. But when I play a game like this, I want it to be fun and fast and simple and make some cool decisions. But instead, it's this thinky grind to a halt. What's the best card to play? What should my speed be? Oh, I didn't calculate that in my thing when I moved, which works in many war games and games like that. You know, there's games that are that complex. But for one that's going to appeal to kids, it says 9+ on it. Yeah, I'm just not buying it. This is the second negative review I've given to a Sonic the Hedgehog game. Man, when are they going to make one that I like a lot? This one looks fantastic. It's just too slow for me. Dice Tower Judgment, Sonic isn't running fast enough for me.